Welcome to Slamcast, where we interview musicians about their creative process and how they navigate the grind of promoting themselves. We're here today with Stefon Bionik Taylor in his studio. I'm your co-host, Brea Scow.
And I'm your co-host, Neil MacArthur. We're excited to have Bionik here. We're actually in his beautiful studio. We're going to hear to interview him about a couple things. He's a teacher at Slam Academy. He teaches the mixing, mastering, and the recording arts classes, and I think he might do the bass music as well. Let's start with some questions, Bionik, and kind of get into it, and we'll see where we can talk about. So first, let's start about how you found Slam and how you got into going to Slam, Bionik.
So my younger brother, Miles, who goes by the DJ name FNK Funk, he was holding a glitch art show at Slam, and he asked me to do music for the art opening, and I came and performed and did my wacky thing, and then JP came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, do you want to have coffee tomorrow?" And then
Cute.
it was like a love connection. And then the next day he said, "Hey, I think you could be a teacher at Slam." And I said, "Well, there's one little glitch. I don't really know how to use Ableton. I only use it for my live performance. I've never made a beat on it. I've never recorded one thing in it. I just make stems and run the stems out of Ableton for my live kind of set." And he was like, "You'll figure it out, no problem." And then after that, next thing I know, 2-3 weeks later, I was teaching a class at Slam. So,
Oh, dang.
yeah, and that was 7 years ago now.
Wow. That's crazy. I remember TAing the class that you were in for Ableton. So that's how long I've been at Slam.
Wow,
That's crazy.
yeah, man.
So that's awesome. So I just wanted people to get to know like how you found Slam since you are one of the teachers, and then let's kind of like bring it further back then, and then let's go back to the roots of everything. How old were you when you started getting into music, and how did you get into music?
Well, I've been a listener since I was like 5 years old. Like I have a really strong memory of being like 5 and being moved deeply by a piece of music and asking what it was. But I started playing when I was about 12, bass guitar, and I won a talent show with a friend of mine in our junior high school. And I was like, wait, this is kind of, this could be cool. And so then my friend, I couldn't afford lessons, but my friend was taking lessons, and he would take his lessons and come home and show me everything he learned at his lessons. So I started playing guitar, and then I moved to Chicago at 17 from Minneapolis and got a job in a studio thinking I play guitar, bongos, a little bass. I like to sing sometimes. I don't know what all that means. And then I kind of realized that's a thing that a producer does too, is know a little bit about a lot of different disciplines within music. And so then I started making tracks and producing artists at like 18.
So at 18, you're producing tracks and stuff with these artists. This wasn't in 2010 or 2020. What were you using back in the day to be producing tracks with artists?
Okay, so the first tracks I ever made were free loops that were recorded on an Eventide H3000, which had a sampler inside of it, a stereo one too. You couldn't do pitch and time compression, but you couldn't do time compression at all. But so when you tuned it down, it got longer, and when you tuned it up, it got shorter and faster. But you could choose 2 loop points within a sample and loop that. So I would find a drum loop, find a loop it, record it onto 24-track tape with the Studer A27 24-track tape machine, record that for 3 minutes, and then find a bass loop or play a bass loop, record it into the H3000, loop it, and then try to loop it in time with the drums that are playing, and then go into record. And then after a couple of minutes, it would drift out of time. And there was no ability to see the audio, grab the audio, move it. It was just recorded on analog tape. Mm-hmm. So it took some determination, like maybe all night, to get the bass loop to link up with the drums just right to get 2 or 3 minutes or something out of it. So those were the first productions I made. Then a guy gave me a broken Emax SP1200 that the drive didn't work. And he was like, "Hey, I think you could do something with this because I'm not I don't know what to do with it. So I got the drive fixed for like $70. And then I had this vintage SP1200, and the guy I was working with, an engineer, gave me a sound library, my first sound library, and taught me how to build a sequence on the SP1200. So then I was SP12 for a minute. Then it got stolen. So then I got an MPC 60 to Roger Lynn, and I still have that. And this was all 1991, 92, when I got these boxes and was trying to put all that together.
Dang. And you play a lot of live instruments too. Did you implement that onto the recordings and stuff?
Yeah, like I actually didn't really start doing that until I got a license for Discover Card, where they wanted to license a piece of my music when I was like 18 or 19. And there was a James Brown sample in it, and they were like, "We want to pay you like $2,500." And I was like, "I'm rich. This is the most money I've ever had." And but we can't use the James Brown sample, so you have to get rid of it. So then I went in the studio that night, and I went along with the sample and went, "Wow, wow," and like did a bunch of screams, and then sampled the one that was the most like it, and removed the James Brown sample and put that in, and then sent it back in. And then they hit me and said, "Hey, we told you to remove the sample." And I said, "I removed it. That's me." And they went, "Cha-ching." And then I was like, "Wait a minute. I'm going to start like replaying and re-singing parts in these sample-based tracks that I'm building." Because I was a crate digger. I made stuff off records. I got like 3,000 records here in the studio and a turntable behind me. And I still dig sometimes to find chord progressions, mood, inspiration, stuff like that. So, yeah.
So this is 18-year-old Bionik doing all this 20 early?
What, my age?
Like what? So not 18. So this is what you're doing in the earlier part of working on music?
Yeah, like between 17 and 19, basically. And then I used the MPC 60 for like 10 years, basically. That was the main box. Samples on pads and constructing, painting with like different samples and kicks and snares and stuff. And there was no DAWs, there was no digital editing, none of that at all. So
with all of that work that you had to put in to make one track, what kept you motivated to do that, and what inspired you throughout that process? Because today it's so easy to click a button. And it sounded like you had to go through a lot to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think every musician or creator probably has different impulses that drive them. One of them is that I'm a little compulsive. And so I'm like, I really want to do this. And then you do all the parts that are necessary to get there. But the other part is, I've been moved by music so many different times and ways as a young person that I was like, I want to create those moments that like send the tingle up your spine or make you feel like you're far away and then really close and everything's muted and everything's bright. All those dynamics that are so like emotion kind of connected. I wanted to do that. So then you toil all night looping something and you're like, it's not right. And then one time you do it and you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Something just happened. There's something like magical or something about what just happened. And then how do you duplicate that over and over again and create that emotional, roller coaster?
Amazing. I relate to the compulsion part of that.
Yeah.
A lot.
I mean, I don't know many artists that don't have proclivities that assist them in their journey. They're a bit obsessive, they're a bit sensitive. Their antenna is stronger than other people's maybe, and they get affected strongly by things, and then that moves them to create or share or whatever,
Yeah.
I think those people make the world go round personally, know.
Other people who don't have the ability to create, they consume what the people who do have the ability to create.
That's a huge part of the equation too. I feel like everybody's an artist if you give them the space to do it in the creative space, but listeners are like more important in a way. I mean, creating is great and it's good. It's a good act in itself, but appreciating is maybe even a better act,
Yeah. And I feel very fortunate as an artist to appreciate the creative process of other people that much more because you get to experience what it's like for yourself. So then I look at something like your career and who you are as a human. I just have so much more appreciation for that because I know I can, kind of formulate what is going through your head a little bit just because I go through the same things a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like when you look at a painting, do you need to know about the artist and what they were going through to appreciate the painting?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you get more appreciation when you know that? Or does it ruin it? Or what,
True.
It's hard to, it's like a individual thing, but I know what you mean. When you know somebody's intent or something, it's easier to understand or like get what they're doing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I think like learning, like going from not doing a creative thing, like before becoming, because I started doing music in my 20s. So it wasn't a thing I grew up with and wasn't a thing that I was doing my entire life. Once you've learned how hard it is to like learn the process, you can appreciate other people's that are doing it or at a different level of it. At first you're like, I can do that. And then you realize whatever your favorite person's at, you can do that, but it's going to be completely different how you do it.
Yeah.
Completely, it's going to be a completely different path and way, but you appreciate everyone that's at those different points, especially people coming up, people above you and below. I've learned that through like being at Slam. You see just all that, you see that level of like people were like you, where you're just a veteran at what you're doing to like people that have never even opened a DAW. And it's so crazy, but there's so much respect in like this, all of us doing it together,
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we're all using these same tools, like we all are gonna, stumble in the same directions kind of, but then our unique voices are all gonna happen, even if we're using the same DAW or the same sounds, the same color palette or something. If you give two painters the same color palette and two canvases, it's like that's not what makes the painting unique.
Right.
Is the primary colors in the brush and the canvas. It's like what the unique voice of the individual is, no matter what tools you're using.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm kind of going into more of like, what are some people that are inspirations to you as you sit down and want to be creative, or who maybe got you to want to be creative? Who are some people that you were really inspired by?
Well, my dad is a huge music influence on me. He grew up in Philly, and I grew up listening to like funk and soul, like P-Funk, Funkadelic, Bootsy Collins, Blackbirds, Lakeside, Midnight Star, just like really, really good American black music from the East Coast. And so when hip hop came into my life, I recognized all these things. I knew, when I heard Ice Cube, America's Most Wanted, like half of those songs are built off P-Funk songs, Funkadelic, or Roger Troutman and Zapp. And those were things I had already been exposed to. So my pops, I always give him a big thank you for his exposure to that and reggae and like a lot of other great music that really influenced me. But then the first person that ever like really trusted me to produce a record is somebody that I often think of for inspiration. His name was John Martin, and he's passed away now. But when I was 18, he said, come and produce a record for me in Scotland. And this guy had released like 40 albums. He was on Island Records. Chris Blackwell signed him. He was like a big dude in the UK. And for some reason, he trusted this little skinny white dude from the Midwest to come and produce a record for him. So,
how did he find you? Like, how did that connection happen?
I was the assistant engineer on a record he recorded in Chicago. I worked at a Chicago recording company for like 3 years, and in those 3 years, I worked with an incredible amount of people, like Aaliyah, R. Kelly, the Winans Family, Smashing Pumpkins, Cheap Trick, like so many different bands, blues groups, Buddy Guy, James Cotton, the Kinsey Report, and then big hip hop people like the Shaq Fu record and like Eric Sermon, Redman, and like all these people came through the studio. So it was a really incredible place to be. So I was an assistant engineer on John Martin's record, and I asked him if I could sample some stuff off of his tapes, like late night after a session, everybody's going home, and I'm going to stay all night, of course, now that the studio's open, and try to make a track. And I said, hey, can I sample some stuff off your tapes? Because we were kind of getting cool a little bit, and I boldly asked him that, not knowing anything about publishing or like any of that.
Sure.
And he went, sure, just don't ruin the tapes. So then I put up his tape and I made a copy of it. And then I put his tape carefully back away in the vault. And then I took this copy I made and I started sampling stuff off of it. And I made a remix to one of his songs and sent it to him in Scotland after the record was done. I sent him a cassette tape in the mail to Scotland. And then
not an MP3.
And there was no CDs were not readily available at that point. And then like I swear maybe 5 weeks later, I get a phone call. I didn't even know if I'd ever hear from him again. And he said, I want you to come do a record for me. And I was like, I've never produced a record before. And he said, well, this will be your first one, won't it? And I was like, okay, what do I do? And he's like, there's a ticket waiting for you at the airport. This is how long ago this shit was.
Oh, fuck.
He had bought a ticket for me and it was waiting at the airport for like a week from the day I was talking to him. And I went to Scotland and made a record with him. And then I went back like 11 more times over the next couple years and went on the road with him, recorded his tour on ADAT. Anybody know what ADATs are?
We'll put it on the screen.
It's another,
Can you bring that up, Neil?
It's another digital audio format, pre-computer, where you could record 8 tracks on a VHS tape.
Okay.
And with 3 of these ADAT machines linked up together with a controller called the BRC, you could get 24 tracks of digital recording, and they were only a few thousand a piece. So you could go into the studio and spend 20 grand and make a record and hire an engineer and buy the tape. Or you could spend 5 to 10 grand on this and make multiple records at your house. It was a huge revolution in recording, even though they sounded like garbage. But anyway, yeah, so I did a lot with this dude. So John Martin's a huge influence. And you know, like how about every other artist I've ever worked with who's like shaped and helped me grow and given me the space to find my own voice and stuff. So there's a lot of people I could thank.
Yeah, a lot of learning lessons.
Totally.
Along that path.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Am I talking too much?
No, this is what we're here for. Also, shoot your shot. For anybody watching, just shoot your shot and remix somebody's song. And you don't even have to physically mail anything. You just, send somebody a little WAV file.
Remix it, put it on your SoundCloud, see what happens.
Yeah.
I had to do airmail to Scotland. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, then, I'm just gonna kind of keep building off of after that. Then, like, were you always just a producer? Like, did you ever go into performing and like with the hip hop music that you were making, or these just beats for rappers, or like? And then I know that you got into performing at one point with Ableton. Like, can you tell me the journey about maybe that?
Yeah. I did start performing earlier in a band in high school. So I was like playing guitar and any instrument I could get my hand on in a like jazz fusion kind of a band. And so I had some experience performing from that. Like I'd already had a chance to get up on stage and feel super awkward and like my guitar's out of tune and I make a lot of noise when I unplug it and plug it in and all that. So it wasn't like my first rodeo. But then with the hip hop stuff, I didn't, like basically 1920, I hooked up with a couple of other producers in Chicago, young guys. And one of them was working with Kanye at the time and Kanye was unknown. And this guy broke off with Kanye and me and him and another guy started a production company called JP Schmedrick. And we were making tracks for these 2 guys I was with, Marco Santucci and Tony Baines, who's Baines God. He's a pretty well-known producer still in Chicago, has done tracks for lots of big people, Dead Prez and like many more. He's super talented. So is Marco. Marco's done lots of cool stuff too, licensing and all kinds of great music. But those guys were both rappers and making tracks together on the MPC in the bedroom to perform with them. yeah, so that was like 93, 94 or something in Chicago. And I got to see a lot of dope underground hip hop form in Chicago and learn from those people, meet those people. And yeah, so that's how the performance thing started to come in, was like producing tracks for people. And then also so producers know you're standing in the audience and someone is performing over your track and people are looking at you like, what are you doing here? And then you're like, my track is being performed, right? But you don't say that. You're just like, yep. But that's kind of a producer's role, is to be behind the scenes and to be a little underappreciated in the effort to raise up someone to their highest potential. You know what I mean? Like do a collaboration that's the greater than the sum of the parts for all of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, performing. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off the...
Oh, no, you're good. I was just wondering how, like, because when I started seeing your music live, you were performing with Ableton stems, doing a crazy hip hop fusion thing, having live percussion-y instruments you had on and all that type of stuff. And I was just wondering, like, when did you go from just producing hip hop beats to turning it into this live set and like performing it out like that?
Yeah, so a really influential friend and artist named MC Zulu, who's also from Chicago. He's an electro reggae artist and performer. And he said to me about 10 years ago, a little more, you need to start performing your original music live. And I'm like, dude, it's all instrumentals. And, you know, actually 10 years ago, what am I talking about? This was more than 10 years ago. This was like 18 years ago, actually.
Where did the time go?
I was living in LA at the time, and he was like, you have to start performing your own stuff and building a following that way. And that was pretty obscure at the time, but I was living in LA and there was a venue called Low End Theory that was pretty famous for a while. It's closed now, but it was all original electronic music and DJs playing a lot of their own stuff. And Wednesday nights, people would like line up around the block and sell this place out at the Airliner over in East LA. And I was fortunate enough to perform there a couple times and then be able to perform there on my own. So I was empowered to play all original, wacky, hip hop inspired EDM, and saw that people could be into that. Then shortly after, I moved to Minnesota, and that wasn't happening at all here. And it's happening more now, which is good. But people don't want to hear things they don't know when they're out. And so it's really hard to not spin other people's things and pull people in. You got to have a really dedicated crowd. And I went on tour in 2016 to a bunch of festivals and attempted to do all my own original stuff, and really got taught a lesson about engaging the crowd and not just like, I'm playing all my stuff. And, because I'm not a DJ. I have a very high level of respect for DJs, but I am not a DJ. I'm a live performer who performs my own original music. So, Ableton, I was on Pro Tools for like 15 years, die-hard Pro Tools person, and my little my cousin had told me to get Ableton really long time ago, but he was making bug music, which
I don't know what that is.
It's like
That's what bugs sound like.
It is experimenting with
Free ASMR brought to you by Bionik.
Like experimenting with oscillator driven synths and like automating and doing all kinds of stuff. It was really cool. But I was like, I don't really see an application for this in what I'm doing. And I was like, Pro Tools, it's the quality level is just, you don't understand. It's so much better. But then I gave in after a while because I realized I needed to perform my stuff live, and I couldn't do it with Pro Tools because it wasn't reliable enough. It was too clunky, too expensive, too bulky. You needed like a truck to bring all the stuff to perform live. So then I asked my cousin again, and he gave me a little tutorial, and I realized I could do stems of my songs in Ableton, perform them live, set up different scenes with the tempos, and create transitional scenes with all these different stems, and so that was my intro to Ableton. And like I said, I had never sequenced anything. I had never pulled up a virtual instrument. I had never recorded one bit of audio. I just was using it to fire off my stems, and that was great. And then fast forward to JP and him saying, "Dude, you could totally learn Ableton," and then the rest is now I'm Ableton diehard. Anti-Pro Tools, anti-Avid, except for the video editing. But yeah, Ableton's just the accessible tool for the creator that is just so much more well-suited to creative workflow and experimentation and finding ideas out of chaos. Pro Tools is just like an engineering tool. It is a standard engineer's format. You go to a studio in Tokyo, there's Pro Tools. If you're a creator, Ableton is, in my opinion, the best tool for sure.
Ableton's the only one that I've ever used. I don't think I've even seen another DAW besides GarageBand. But
tried Logic, and it was before I wanted to try, so I didn't get that far into Logic.
Yeah, I've done them all. I mean, I've done Logic, Pro Tools,
Fruity Loops.
Reason, Cubase. I've seen and used all of those, and I can't do FL, man. I don't know what it is. It's like the anti-creator for me. I know it's free because it's cracked, so everyone who's like 12 and above has a copy of FL, but I've met some people who can really do incredible things with it, but when I get in there and try to work, it's like, why am I having to do all this to make a MIDI clip? You know what I mean? Where it's like Ableton, it's like beep, toot, 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 MIDI clip done. It's looping already in time. So
yeah, I've worked with FL for a little bit, or I've worked with people with FL, and I'm like, I get why I use Ableton. You don't have to open 5 windows to see one thing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, perfect. Well, no, then that's cool. Yeah, I was gonna say now let's kind of move into the next part of. We just wanted to ask you, like, when it comes to sitting down and working on music with Ableton, like, how do you get started? How do you get ideas going for maybe even a blank project or a blank idea?
Well, if I'm collaborating with somebody, it starts with a conversation and like talking about intent and feelings and frustration, joy, anger, and then invariably after a couple minutes of like talking about what's important to that person or us right now, somebody says, "Man, I'm just putting it all on the line right now." And then it's like, wait a minute. What you just said, not only does it sound like a lyric, it is genuine feeling and intent, and you know it, you believe it, it's something you're feeling. Let's start working on that. And then I'm like, that mood is melancholy, maybe minor, sounds kind of something muted in the background. What kind of palette am I thinking based on the emotional content of their idea or our idea? And that starts any collaboration that I do, whether I'm teaching with a bunch of young people or whether I'm working with like a seasoned artist. I'm like, so what's up? I'm not like, let me play you a beat. It's like that. To me, that yields a different result. That is cool, but it's like 2 trains going the same direction. When you do it from the catalyst, being something together and something real, then it becomes something that lasts, I feel like,
Yeah. That's so important to music, to have that emotional relation that you can relay to your audience in the future. But it starts with you.
Totally.
It always starts with your emotions.
And then because of that genuine intent, people hear it and they go, I can relate to this. I believe their story, their delivery. I'm put in this place, and you're like, it's my song now. When I listen to this song, I'm mad at this person. It always makes me think of this or whatever.
Yeah.
You take it into your own story, which is pretty dope. But then I go, okay, is this a fast or a slow tempo? How does that affect the mood? And then for me personally, I'll start a beat anyway from a loop or a sample or whatever and build off that. But for me, it's a kick, a snare, and a hat is like, that's what I was limited to when I was growing up, was like, you have a box and you can sample 3.9 seconds or something on the box. And so you have a snare, a kick, a hat, and a little blip or something that you try to make a bass out of. And if you can make a kick and a snare and a hat like dance on their own, find the right sounds and the right pattern at the right tempo, anything is possible.
So you start with the drums
most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Cool.
a drums and bass person, and I
Sure.
feel like that engine in the music is something that just really resonates with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I start with the relationship of the dynamic feel of a low end, mid range, and high end instrument like a kick, snare, and a hat,
Mm-hmm.
and then a bass, and that relationship can be, so enthralling and so full and encompassing, like that. The right combination of those four elements, that's a song. Then anything over the top, a little ding dong ding, or like somebody singing ooh in the background, the right bass and drums, and that relationship is like everything. So for me.
Okay, cool. That makes sense because you are a hip hop head. Like that makes total sense to me.
Hip hop, reggae,
Yeah.
Dance hall, funk, soul, R&B,
Mm-hmm.
all those things are like bass and drum driven.
Yeah. Rhythm.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
I remember Chuck Love saying that having a good rhythm bed, you can put anything on it. So I agree with that because I do a lot of my start because of hearing that and working with you and people and like EDM stuff. That tends to be what I do too. So I think that the drums and bass, like if you can make those do what you're saying, it's anything else on top is just like icing and stuff and just creating the mood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to move towards like present day of the projects that you're doing right now because I know you have a lot on your plate and I'm just really curious of how you balance everything of what you're doing. So maybe you could touch on like the projects that you're doing today and just give us some tips and tricks of how you balance everything.
Tell us about the plate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually right now I'm teaching more than anything, which has turned into a really great thing, kind of feeding off what you were saying too, Brea, that like, seeing that creative process and people find that moment of inspiration inspires me, and it helps me find new paths for my own music, my creation process. So teaching is like you watch 30 kids or 30 adults all be inspired by a creative idea that they come up with together. So that is just very inspiring to me. So I've been teaching a lot, but I'm also always developing artists, collaborations with artists, and trying to license songs and performing and doing all those things. And I think the key to the balance for me as somebody who's had to go through a lot. I mean, I've been working for myself as a musician for over 30 years, like no other employment that isn't music related somehow. And you got to be diverse. You got to be kind of a Renaissance person. What is it? Does it have something to do with music? I'm there. Whatever it is, I'll figure it out because if I'm doing music, it's worthwhile. And that's led me to the teaching thing. It's led me to all these different aspects. And I feel like you can't do them all always at the same time. So you have to go in cycles. And so my advice is to listen to yourself when you don't feel like creating as much. That doesn't mean I have a creative block and I can't create right now. What that means is you have energy to put somewhere else. Maybe it's in some promotion. Maybe you learn some more about ways you could, reach more people with your music. You do some research for a while. And then I find I do some months where I'm performing a project that I developed with an artist 6 months ago, a year ago. Now we're doing live shows. So I'm rehearsing and, putting arrangements together and stuff. And then, so long story short, follow the cycles that happen. Don't fight them. And what I've even realized is for me, they're long cycles. Like I'll go for 3 months and not make a lot of compositions for myself. I might do things for work, for dancers, choreographers, or whatever, but I'm not down here building my own projects. Then all of a sudden, I'll work for 3 months creating and mixing and completing those things. Like mixing, there's another thing. Build for 3 months, then mix for 3 months, because
Sure.
whatever you've built in those 3 months needs to be taken to the hole and completed.
Mm-hmm.
Finish those things, and then what happens after that? It's promotion time. It's time to engage people more and not be be the studio rat and live down here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when I was younger, it was like one day of the week I was trying to do this, and another day I was trying to do this, and now I'm just following these cycles more.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Listening
think
to your gut more.
totally.
Mm-hmm.
Like today isn't a creative day. Don't fight that. Because creativity isn't like waiting for it anyway. It's like, let's go be productive and make something. You know, you build enough songs and then you're just able to have creative time where you're doing creative things. It's not like a lightning bolt. You're just working.
Mm-hmm.
It's just doing the work.
Cool. I was gonna ask really quick about finishing projects and how many projects do you find yourself not finishing now, or do you force yourself to finish everything that you start?
Not everything, but I am a finisher. I like right now, I just went through all my Ableton sessions in my computer that were a mystery,
Okay.
and realized I have 3 EPs that are ready to mix in 3 different genres.
Whoa.
3, 7, or 8 song EPs. So now I know I've already put in all this time creating all these things, and they all fit together in their little, categories in their worlds. So time to mix those things and finish them off. But there is songs that are an exercise, and they don't go any further than the creation process or even just the inception process. But I try to finish like just about everything that I start. And then, but for me too, it feeds into my compulsion a bit to do that. Thank you. And I also, I've realized that it's kind of a numbers game. The more songs I have out with artists, collaborations, joint projects, have a hand in a song, a hand in production or whatever, the more chances for a license, a song to get plays, a song, some DJ in, Czech Republic to start playing your song. It's just like get them out there, and then the cross-pollination will happen. And when I was a teenager, I saw a little bit of that, and I thought maybe I could make this into something bigger. And so now I have like 600 or 700 songs registered with ASCAP, and I've made thousands more, but I have like that many out in the world. And so those things create opportunities.
Yeah.
Just literally something 10 years old that just, came up for a license. So it's like you just do the work and you finish it. You sign the painting and you hang it up, and then you say it's done. And that's a document of where you are today, your knowledge, your experience, your passion, all that. It's valid. It's good. Tomorrow you'll have this in your tool belt as an experience to draw from. And every time you do that, your tool belt gets bigger. And then I don't know what happens then.
You just keep going again. The cycle
what's the tip? Because that's probably one of the hardest things for newer producers to break through is like, how do I know my song is done? Like, what is a tip you would tell somebody that would maybe push them in the right direction? Because everyone's going to have their own version of that. But.
Yeah, well, I would say the mixing process is where that happens, hopefully. Mastering is not like I'm going to fix everything that's wrong with my mix or my song or my sounds or my performance. It's to get it as loud as possible and to, glue it all together so it has a sound that we're all so accustomed to, that kind of compressed, stuck together sound. But I would say I listen to a song as I'm mixing 30, 40 times, before I get the general kind of balance together and the relationships. And then the next 200 times I listen and I'm adjusting all those individual relationships. I find things stick out to me. Something sticks out and this is weird, or I'm bored for this moment. There should be something here. There's nothing here. This section's too long. The dynamic curve of the song isn't resonating, isn't like happening. So at some point after this is too loud, this is too long, this needs a thing, this needs a riser, this needs this. After a while, the checklist is done. And then you're like, I'm not bored anymore. I'm everything that happens makes sense to me. There's nothing out of place. Then it's like you could sit and tweak for the rest of your life on that song. Or you could say, you know what? This is as good an engineer as I am today and as good as a producer and a performer. Commit. That's what I would say. You commit. You just say, I'm going to stand on this. It's a document of where I am, and that's okay. Even if it's not great, that means... The other thing is, like, for real self-realization, like, listening to something you've created back that many times gives you an opportunity to look at yourself in a way you don't often see yourself, like kind of from the outside.
Yeah.
Here's all these creative decisions I made, emotional decisions, and then you look at them all and you're able to kind of see something that you didn't see when it was in your head, you know?
Yeah.
And so that is a really important exercise in itself. Like as a singer, Brea, I'm sure you know, you hear yourself sing and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's what I sound like? Like, this is something I need to work on. This sounds more beautiful than I thought it did. I'm really doing good here and I didn't even know I was. And this is something I need help with. So those are just things that you only see when you're looking from the outside. So you're looking at your composition from the outside, satisfy yourself, you know, don't be bored. Don't be, you know, left wondering what's going on. Solve all those problems, make a little checklist, you know, fix the synths, turn down the snare, make this section shorter, and then go down and go boop, 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 boop. Then there you go. What are you waiting for? Then you just commit, render it, lay it down.
And once you do that too and give yourself some space in between current you, and that project that was past you, you have more to reflect on too. I listened to some earlier projects I did and I'm just like, whoa, I sound so different than I do now. And that was like 3 years ago.
Do you listen to your records often that you've made, your own records?
Not often, but maybe like twice a year. I'll just go back on my own Spotify and like listen to things to practice for performing, but also just because I'm like curious what I sounded like 3 years ago.
Yeah. You learn a lot for sure. You know, if I go back to the 90s and listen to the stuff like the John Martin remix, I'm like, oh my. Like,
do you have that?
Wow, yeah, I do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Put it up. I'm just kidding.
I have it in this computer even. No, we're not going to pull it up.
Oh, no. No, one thing I wanted to touch on with like how you were describing all the levels and stuff is something you teach in your mixing and mastering class of the zero-sum mixing. That right there helped me finish so much music because it's like if you have everything that sounds cool to you and all the ideas, and then the last thing that a lot of people get stuck on is the mix right? Is it good enough to put out? And you make that checklist with the zero-sum mixing, meaning once you knock out all the little peaks and all the stuff and get it to a certain point, you know it's done. And that was really cool to have. Like, for me, that was a tool that I got in my belt actually from your class, was like learning that now I have all the cool ideas. And then once I learned zero-sum mixing, I'm like, and now the mix is as good as I possibly can get it right now for where I'm at with the zero-sum mixing. And I can just put that out and then start my next mix.
Wow, that's humbling, dude. Thanks.
Yeah.
You know, that's like an analog technique back in the day where you just take one of your predominant instruments, like in our universe, the kick, and turn it up on your fader until you're as close to zero on your main 2 mix as you can get. And then turn up your bass, close your eyes and turn up the bass and put it at the volume you want against the kick. And then look over at the master fader and look how much you're clipping. And then turn those 2 instruments down that much. Clip in 3 dB, turn them both down in their relative position, 3 dB, and then go through the whole song like that. And so like you were like, how do you know when it's done? Well, it's done when the kick and the snare and the hat and the bass and the melodic elements and the voice are at the right level. When the balance is right, like that's what mixing really is. Take processing and effects and all those things as an afterthought to, are they good sounds? Are they musical relationships? Are they at the right balance so that they are showcasing the rhythm, the pocket, the feel, the genre, like all those things. So when you do the zero-sum, you're like, here's how loud I want the snare against the kick drum. You know, how loud do I turn up the snare? Well, you have to look at another instrument to understand that. So when you break your mix, I'm done with my song. I'm done making my composition. Now mute everything, open up the kick drum, make it as close to zero as possible, then start bringing up instruments. And as you bring them up, you know what's causing an overload on your 2 mix because you knew the bass and the kick were fine together. And when you open up the snare, there's an overload. Well, it must be the snare. So it's another way to kind of like checklist it out. Like, here's the relationships. Do I need to move this later with track delay and Ableton, which is like the most beautiful musical function ever? Or do I need to EQ it, or do I need to change the volume of it? It's like, it's really, it's all just like project management. That's it.
Oh.
Take mixing and mastering with Bionik and learn everything you need to know.
Well, yeah, no, that's dope. I had 2 questions that I think I wanted to get to. One is like, how has working with the slam community affected like you as a musician? Like, how has being a part of this ecosystem been benefited you and benefited maybe yourself? I don't know.
Yeah, like I can't speak to how other people have benefited from it, but I hope that people have gotten as much out of it as I have, because the community part of it is one of the reasons I always want to come back and teach classes at Slam. Not only do I learn stuff constantly from these other artists, but I'm constantly amazed at how someone who's only been making tracks for 6 months or a year is at a level that took me 15 years to get to. And it's because of the accessibility of the tools, and Ableton's a part of that too. So I just think, I don't know if that answered. What was your question again? I'm
just
sorry.
how we're being in slam in that ecosystem benefiting you, or
so the community there is just really great. And it's also led me to push people to collaborate with one another and have me do collaborations with people. It's just like a community that is very open to different ideas. I think a lot of what Slam embodies is about that, like a supportive environment where people's music is accepted. Like when I'm teaching a class and somebody plays a song, like people like are clapping and like, wow, and oh my God, when are you opening for Ganja White Night? And when are you know what I mean? Because that kind of support from your peers is like such an important process of growth. And it's great to hear it from your partner and your mom and your uncle and all that, but they're a little biased maybe. And so it's nice to have other artists that are like, what, this snare like isn't working or something.
Yeah.
That's what I really love about Slam, is that ability to considerately, share information with one another. And my music has gotten better. Other people I've seen have grown so much at Slam just through the passion of creating, writing songs and performing them. And so, yeah, it's just, it's kind of a wellspring in a way, because it's this open creative environment. So yeah, that's what I love about it.
It was like the first place I found that wasn't my mom and friends. It was like kids with laptops and homies with laptops making beats. You're like, oh, I'm just not the only one in my room by myself anymore. Yeah. And you become friends with you become friends with them, and your friends you make. It's interesting, the friends you make when you're doing creative processes, because they're like they're your friends, but you connect in a different kind of way when it comes to like sitting in the studio and working on music for hours with a homie. You learn something different about them than maybe just sitting with another homie just drinking a beer talking about the day. So
definitely
met a lot of those people through Slam. Like a big part of my friend group now, after being there for 7 years, are just homies from Slam. So
yeah, same. I agree with that. And when you take a class at Slam too, you're not just getting the technical knowledge, you're also getting the wisdom of people who have done the thing you're trying to do, and just real conversations and advice. Like when I took your class, we talked about real life a lot, which I appreciated, because if you take like school for physics, if you're going to college for physics, they're not going to ask you how your day is going. They're just going to sit you down and like give you bullet point things to learn. So that's one thing that I really appreciate about Slam, and just taking class from you specifically and from other people too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brea.
Sweet. Yeah. Well, we're about to wrap up. I had one just quick question that I wanted to grab on here before we have to say goodbye to the podcast. So you as the when you were coming up as a musician back in the day, you had to promote yourself. What is different then and now, and how you were doing it back in the day, and how much since you maybe I don't know, or like maybe you're not promoting your music right now since you're doing so many other things. But I just want to know like the contrast you feel.
This has come up a lot lately. So I'll just say this, like I'm going to age myself a little bit here. That, I've sold, cassette tapes and vinyl in the stores and out of the trunk and on the street corner. And I've sold CDs in the stores and on the street corner. And I have sold digital downloads. And now at a time where there is no digital download sales, we're in a new paradigm, and I am someone who I made a lot of my bones before there was the internet, much less social media. So I really think it's relationship driven, and I do use social media to promote releases, kind of half-heartedly. Usually the artist is the one taking the lead on that, and I do supportive promotion, but I'll do strategizing, hire PR people, or help to lay out the framework of a release or something.
Sure.
But yeah, I think I would say prepare yourselves for the fact that there probably won't be cell phones in 10 years or social media at all like you recognize it now. And when I say that, sometimes, especially to like younger people, they're like, "Oh,
I feel like you know something we don't know."
well, I've seen it change 5 times.
Yeah.
the format, you know what I mean? And so none of us know what's next. None of us know what's next. And it's going to involve a little bit of everything: the analog past, the digital present, the web 3 future. All that stuff is all going to be intertwined, but I guarantee that it's going to be different than today. So do not get too locked into a specific promotional platform. I got like 1,300 followers on Instagram, Bionik Music on Instagram. And I don't care because I like those people. They're great. Those are my supporters, my core people that I really like resonate with. But that does not pay the rent, That doesn't pay the rent. And so I focus my time, instead of doing maybe some of the social media I should to reach a broader group of people, I am catering to a smaller group of people, and I spend my time creatively. And so I'm building projects, I'm teaching, I'm trying to connect with other people, inspire them creatively. And to me, that's as valuable or more valuable in a way. So then spending the time in a universe that I firmly believe is going to change in the near future to an extent where all your followers, all your likes, all your shit probably won't matter anymore. So I'm not saying it's happening tomorrow, but I'm saying it's going to change. So I'm not investing too much of my life in a medium that I believe is probably malleable and fragile and ever changing. But music creation and creative, process, that will grow and change and keep producing new fruits and flowers and stuff. So I just put my time in on that. Not to say I don't promote or think about any of those things, but it isn't the vital component in what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you already have the creative output of everything you have. The social media doesn't need to be the. You've already established yourself as well. Is what I've. You've already put like. Where you wouldn't even need to be on Instagram, and you'd still have projects and you'd still be working as that.
Yeah, it's like there's enough seeds out there, enough songs that it's like word of mouth. It isn't me promoting. It's like an old school method, It's like you put an ad in the newspaper or something. Best lawyer in town. If you need legal services, hit me up. Like I've just never had to do that. You don't have to promote in that way if your content is a certain level of quality. And I'm not saying that my content is a certain level of quality. It's a learning process. But if you're dedicated and make enough paintings, dances, stories, pieces of music, drawings, then you could be as good as anybody, you know?
Yeah. I think one thing about choosing a creative path in any facet, you just have to be in it for the long haul, and you have to do it genuinely, and then things will just show up in your life after you do that.
Definitely. This is another, my friend MC Zulu just said this recently, and I've said it probably too many times to people recently, but I think it's a really good analogy, and kudos to Zulu for this one. But you know, it's like when you're in the center of the hurricane and you have all your hand in all these things, it's really hard to see how the pieces fit together. But when you do it for long enough, the pieces coalesce, and then you're like, wait a minute, all this makes sense. This fits with this. All these different things I've been cultivating and growing, they've all grown together into this thing. And you just didn't see it because you were in the middle of it all, throwing the piece, you know, do your head down, learning, growing. You don't see how all of it fits. But yeah, you know, just for all of us, it's like, keep grinding, keep making your creative content, your music, your art, whatever it is, and then
put it out there for people to see.
Put it out there, and then the trail of breadcrumbs is there for people to follow your growth, your change, your, you know, all that. So yeah.
Amazing.
Dope.
It's always so great to talk to you, Bionik.
Yeah, we appreciate you. We appreciate you coming or letting us come into your studio and having conversation with you.
I'm super into being the first guest on Slamcast.
Oh, we appreciate it. Now let's give it up for Bionik. Cue the applause. Well, thank you so much, man. We have to say goodbye, but we hope that everyone out there have a good day. We appreciate y'all.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks for watching Slamcast. Wasn't that a fun episode?
Want to become a member at Slam Academy? Go to slamacademy.com for more information.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.